Everyone, I'm calling this meeting to order, hopefully before something else happens. I want to thank everyone who has been so patient this evening waiting for this meeting to get going. Welcome everyone. This meeting of the Special Joint Committee on Medical Assistance in Dying. I would like to begin by welcoming members of the committee, witnesses, as well as those watching this meeting on the web. My name is Mark Garneau, and I am the House of Commons Joint Chair of this committee. I'm joined by the Honourable Yona Martin, the Senate's Joint Chair. Today we continue our examination of the statutory review of the provisions of the Criminal Code relating to medical assistance in dying and their application. As you know, we have certain sanitary measures in effect through the Office of the Board of Internal Economy, and I expect everyone to respect those rules this evening. Just a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. If you have a point to make, you can use the raise hand feature. We provide translation in both official languages, and you may choose the language of your choice. And the way we do things is we start off with the witnesses each giving a 5-minute statement, after which we proceed with a question period. Tonight we have the pleasure of having, as individuals, Mr. Andrew Adams. Also, we have Mr. Ghislain Leblond, former Deputy Minister. And from the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, we have in person this evening Sarah Jama, the Executive Director. Welcome to all three of you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. And with that, we will begin with opening remarks by Mr. Adams, followed by Mr. Leblond, and followed by Ms. Jama. Mr. Adams, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes to make your initial presentation.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. Just to be sure, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. I am a person with a chronic illness and disabilities. I have a condition which has caused deep abdominal spasms along with other terrible symptoms for a very long time now. I often experience intense, long-lasting episodes that remind me of being poisoned. I sometimes say I have seasons of pain, as an episode can last for a few months at a time. I have lived in British Columbia all of my life and feel very much shaped by open-minded West Coast values. I support access to choice. As the law had changed in Canada to more closely reflect the Carter decision, I decided to apply for an assisted dying assessment. The new law, C7, made it legal for people like myself, for whom death was not reasonably foreseeable, to have the possibility of MAID. Putting suffering at the core of the law shows great compassion and humanity. The ability of each of us to say enough is enough when suffering becomes too much is an essential liberty. The dysfunction of my body has often felt like a prison. In applying to and being approved for MAID, I have taken responsibility for myself. I feel less worry, and a sense of overall relief permeates my days. I don't feel the need to use this choice right now, but I am very happy that it is there. The steady worsening of my condition has reduced my capacity to function in my daily living activities and lowered the quality of my life. There has been no amount of mitigating these painful abdominal episodes that has alleviated my predicament. I feel that I now have more of the tools needed to face the long-lasting difficulties ahead of me. I am enormously proud of my fellow citizens. Thank you for allowing the option to exist in Canada for people like me who suffer continuously in life. I have had no say in deciding whether my body would trap me in intolerable suffering or not. I have coped with the cards I was dealt. Knowing I can access a safe and serene exit from my suffering is like reflecting upon some beautiful poetry. Suddenly there's a rhyme and a reason to my everyday. I feel a new sense of acceptance in dealing with my daily challenges, an added emotional benefit this medical care has provided to me. We all want to feel a sense of security in this world. MAID as an option has provided that sense of security to me. I feel that the reduced stress and increased peace of mind has allowed me to better cope with my limitations. As a result, I tend to have an anxious attachment to this choice, and I'm skeptical about calls for increased barriers being imposed. People with disabilities must not be treated as a monolith, but rather as individuals. The fear that some individuals may have about MAID should have no negative impact on access to choice. I am my own person and do not want to be grouped together with others. With that said, when discussing protections for persons with disabilities, I have a few suggestions for policy improvements. The first one would be that some form of means testing that includes assessing whether the person has housing and supports from either family or service agencies, etc., before approval is being granted. Second, allowing voluntary self-exclusion for those who want to opt out of MAID. The individual could choose a fixed amount of time to have this exclusion in place and could renew it as needed or desired. I came about this idea because I know that at casinos and establishments like that, people can have a self-exclusion where they just don't have any access to that particular activity. I also recommend quickly implementing the Canada Disability Benefit to reduce poverty. And overall, I hope to see a continued balance between patient access and reasonable safeguards, having that be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams, for that personal testimony. We'll now go to Monsieur Ghislain Leblond, our second witness. Mr. Leblond, je ne suis pas sûr si vous êtes...
Mr. Leblond, I'm not sure if you're a francophone or anglophone, but you have 5 minutes, and I think you understand both languages. Thank you. You're on mute. Now, am I still on mute? No, now we can hear you very well. Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you. Good evening to everyone. My name is Ghislaine Leblond. I'm 77 years old. I had the good fortune to spend the bulk of my career in the public service, particularly as Associate Deputy Minister in Ottawa and as a Deputy Minister in Quebec, in the Quebec government. I had to retire at the age of 48 because I have a neurodegenerative disease that causes me to be progressively paralyzed. I have had to use a wheelchair for over 20 years. You'll understand, therefore, in light of tonight's discussions, that these are of the greatest interest to me. I was an active participant in the process that led to the adoption of Quebec's law on end-of-life care, and particularly medical assistance in dying. So given the situation I'm in today, I am potentially a candidate for medical assistance in dying. So I thank you for having received me today.
Thank you for the work you're doing. Vous faites honneur à votre...
You are really doing an honorable work as members of Parliament and senators. And speaking to you, and rather in your work on such an important issue as medical assistance in dying. You are facing problems or issues that are not easy subjects to resolve. So I thank you for that. But on the other hand,
you're a lucky bunch of people because it's not given to everybody to have the opportunity to make decisions that will improve the lives of thousands of people, of thousands of our fellow citizens, our fellow Canadians. Un des sujets qui m'intéresse.
One of these subjects that interests me that I would like to discuss with you is the idea that is circulating that people with physical disabilities would need to have some kind of safeguards more than other members of the public. And so I would like to talk to you about that in the discussion that will follow. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leblanc, for your testimony, your personal testimony. And we will now move on to our third witness.
Over to you for your opening statements. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The last time I spoke in front of the Senate about MAID, the arguments I posed along with Dr. Nahid Donzani, Gabrielle Peters, and many others were that disabled people who were suffering because of systemic failures due to systemic ableism would be negatively impacted by this expansion. People who were living in abject poverty or who were scared to enter our horrendous long-term care institutions or who were on wait lists for treatments or who couldn't see a reason for living because of a lack of accessible, affordable housing would use this expanded MAID as their only option. I spoke about Chris Gladders the last time I was here, a man from Hamilton, Ontario who used MAID because he was left sitting in his feces and urine for days at his long-term care home. Elected officials, you all gaslit us for months, stating that it was impossible for people to use MAID in these ways due to safeguards. You implied that the rights of people like Nicole Gladue, who testified that she wanted the choice to die with a champagne glass in her hand, was more important than the need to protect folks that I spoke about who were being systemically coerced into using.
Ms. Jama, could you just slow it down? The interpreters are have to translate it,
yes.
So just speak a little bit slower.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chairman, since you interrupted the witness, would it be possible to turn the volume down a bit? Because it's impossible to hear the interpretation because the volume in this room is so high.
Volume also because the translation is going into some people's ears and they're hearing your English because you're so close to them. So you can speak slower and perhaps lower the volume a little bit, and perhaps the technicians can lower the well, if there's anything they can do, yeah.
I'm a very loud person. I apologize.
No problem. It's a loud subject.
Okay. Can I start? Okay. You implied that the... Oh, well, I already read that part. You implied that race and poverty had very little to do with the freedom and choice. Nicole Gladue has since died naturally, not using MAID, yet her testimony allowed for the death of Sophia, who shared in death that the government sees me as expendable trash, a complainer, useless, and a pain in the ass, and the death of Denise, who explained that she applied for MAID essentially because of abject poverty. And these are two among many others who used it only because the government funded access to death over their ability to have food, shelter, and a sustained life. Due to your unwillingness to understand the adverse impacts of an expanded MAID, more disabled people have already died who would have been alive since the last time I spoke to you. Across this country, social assistance rates further debilitate and harm disabled people by enforced poverty. Across this country, it can take years to access pain clinics, therapy, specialists, primary care practitioners, palliative care, and palliative care is so chronically underfunded that it's considered a privilege. Across this country, disabled people are forced into long-term care facilities where the conditions are so egregious and fraught with instances of physical, emotional, sexual abuse, lack of nutritionist food options, proper hygiene practices, so much so that we've normalized the death of 20,000 institutionalized disabled people from COVID-19. Across this country, there have been a reported 3.4 million COVID cases. We are seeing a mass debilitation of the most marginalized Canadians, responding only with greater access to death. The low estimate is 300,000 Canadians who are suffering from long COVID, who are now newcomers to the disabled community and raised by an ableist society. And what they are seeing as the response to their newfound impairments is the acceptance that to be disabled is a fate worse than death. That comes exactly from this committee. What have you done to respond to the growing disabled population who don't have dementia? The population who aren't sure what this new life of debility, of rampant ableism, and perhaps unemployment means to them. On the question of advanced directives, we must acknowledge that people can and will often change their minds, even after consenting to MAID. It is ableist to assume that people would 100% be unwilling to live in bodies that are deemed as less functioning. True choice is the ability to change your mind. It is also worth noting that dementia is one disability that has been brought up often by this committee in this conversation of advanced directives, and this disability impacts Black people disproportionately, yet this voice has been left out. On the question of mature minors, we must remember that mental illness and suicidality are at an all-time high for youth across Canada and disproportionately impacts disabled youth. It takes time to adjust, especially as a young person, to a disabled life and resources. Until we are sure to have measures that prevent implicit coercion of youth due to pressures such as bullying, childhood poverty rates, and the lack of access to resources, I recommend that you limit any conversation of MAID from children, especially in relation to Track 2. Lastly, it's important to note that last week, the Canadian Human Rights Commission, in response to reports that disabled people are, in fact, like we said earlier last year, using MAID to escape systemic failures. They said medical assistance in dying cannot be a default for Canada's failure to fulfill its human rights obligations. They said this because this is what you have allowed, despite the warnings. How will you make amends for the lives that have been lost so far due to systemic coercion because of your decision to expand MAID specifically for the disabled community? The right of an individual's needs should not supersede the harms faced by others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jama. That concludes the opening statements, and we'll now go to the question period, and I will hand it over to my co-chair, Senator Yona Martin.
Thank you. Thank you to all the witnesses for your testimonies. So we'll begin the first round with 5 minutes and question and answer for Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony and giving us of your time and experience this evening. My first question will be directed through the Co-Chair to you, Ms. Jama, and you talked about having appeared before at the committee, having spoken to senators and members, but do you feel that the community, that disabled Canadians, have been adequately consulted about MAID legislation?
Absolutely not. In this panel alone, 4 representatives, 2 today, are from Dying with Dignity. Why am I the only representative from a disability-based org? Why is this the only day that we talk about disability rights when it impacts all of the sections that I have talked about? This shows that we are being left out in this committee, and we have been left out systemically this entire time throughout this process. On top of that, the brief process of submitting only 1,000 words leaves disabled people out who can't submit their thoughts like through written format, or who don't have access to internet, or who would prefer to communicate using video. And we asked this committee in writing what we could do to include other disabled people, and we got no response. This committee has shown no desire to reach out to disabled people other than the people who are afraid of dying, but not people who are living with disabilities. And it's a shame, and it's been like that this entire time.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Again, I'd like to follow up on one of the comments that you made in your opening remarks, and it had to do with you made the contention that the MAID framework is ableist in nature, and I'd like to ask you why, and perhaps you can expand on that for me, please.
Yes, this is not a new sort of understanding that has come from disability community. Over 200 organizations this entire time spoke about the fact that this is ableist because we expanded MAID specifically to people who are living with disabilities, who are seen as suffering. But many of us, we struggle day to day. It doesn't mean that my needs should be met simply by being offered death. I am terrified as someone with mental health disabilities and physical disabilities to enter a doctor and to be offered MAID as a form of treatment when I already deal with suicidality. Like, you're not listening to those who are already living with disabilities, you're predominantly hearing from people who are afraid to be disabled in the future, and those two things are not the same. Disabled people have already died because of those decisions, and we can't lose another single life for somebody that should have been fed or housed or offered therapy. It's not enough to say these things will come later, because we already know 200 people who were not terminally ill have died, and many of those people were people whose needs were not being met elsewhere. We can't allow other people to continue to die.
Thank you. Again, through the co-chair to Ms. Jama, why do issues of race and poverty matter in this conversation, in your opinion?
So like I mentioned earlier, you guys spend a lot of time talking about dementia, but dementia disproportionately impacts Black and racialized people who are caregivers, who are staying at home and supporting families, and you've not heard from Black people living in that situation. Black people are less likely to send families into long-term care institutions because of how volatile they are, and the mistreatment there and the racism there too. In terms of, in general, with Black people who are experiencing medical ableism and medical racism, you're already being worried about being coerced into your treatment plan. So for me, even the concept of rejecting surgeries was very difficult for me when I was a young person. And so when you already feel like because of your race you're being treated differently or you're being othered, and we already know that there's a lot of data that says that Black people are mistreated or treated differently when you enter a hospital. You add that into the conversation around MAID. Will Black people be, pushed into accessing MAID versus other treatments that should be available? I think yes, and I don't think we've done enough research to be sure that Black people won't be disproportionately affected. And I know throughout COVID, Black people have been predominantly affected and have comorbidities. And so we are not sure how this will impact the most marginalized in our communities. And the voices that you have been listening to are predominantly white, and that scares me.
And just a quick question.
Very quick, about 20 seconds.
Just through you, Madam Co-Chair. Do you believe the same is true with respect to people being vulnerable to accessing MAID before having accessed other options is true as well for the disabled community, as you've said, for racialized or for Black Canadians?
I also believe it to be the same for disabled people. I think that disabled people are often experiencing medical ableism. We've had many people online talk about doctors who don't listen to them, doctors who don't provide proper supports, and people who are afraid to enter long-term care systems on the basis of mistreatment in long-term care too. That's been documented.
Thank you.
And so many people are more vulnerable to, if you're disabled particularly, to accessing MAID versus other treatments.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jama. Next, we'll have 5 minutes from Mr. Maloney.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And I want to thank all three witnesses, not only for being here tonight, but for displaying patience that you have. We're starting very late tonight. As Ms. Jama said, time is of the essence. We need to dedicate ourselves to the issue at hand. Sometimes that is delayed by procedural, I will use the word nonsense in the House of Commons, and tonight was an example of that. So you have my apologies on behalf of the committee. My first question is to Mr. Adams. Thank you, sir, for being here tonight. You indicated that you had applied for MAID and that you'd been approved. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
Did you apply for MAID after Bill C-14 was passed, or did you apply only after C-7 came into force?
I had initially applied when C-14 had passed, or yes.
Okay, thank you. So, look, lived experience is important for all of us on this committee for the reasons we've heard. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to sort of take us through the process that you went through after C-14 and after C-7 so we have a better understanding of how it works. And if you could, was it the same group of medical practitioners that you were dealing with on both occasions?
Yeah, well, okay, so the first time that I tried to apply for MAID, the process was shut down fairly quickly. Initially, I had been considering applying under the sort of interim court ruling that was there before the actual C-14 bill was passed. And as soon as it became clear that C-14 was going to limit eligibility, I was basically told, it's just not going to go forward, and I sort of stopped trying after that for a while. C7 then passed, and I reached out to my local health authority. And through that coordination center, I was able to be put in touch with a doctor and went through the 90 days. So, that was quite a lengthy assessment, and the consultation with the third party, the specialist, was very, very thorough. And I had done more tests than I have ever done before. And this was a specialist that has dealt with me for a number of years, so knows me, knows my condition, knows what I've tried. So, I went through all of the other measures in the law and was found eligible. And I waited some time, and then I eventually got a second approval as well. One of the doctors was part of my initial exploration of C14, and clearly had two different conclusions with these two different bills.
Thank you. But those were based on the law. Those were legal conclusions, not medical conclusions, I'm assuming. That's why the test under the legal criteria under the first legislation.
Essentially, yes, I would say so, because the full assessment didn't really happen on the first one. It was kind of just a meet and greet, and yes.
Thank you. So do you feel you had a full hearing, if I can put it that way, and you had ample opportunity to discuss all of the implications, ramifications with your doctor and everybody who was involved in the decision-making process?
Yes, I do.
Exclusion. What can you put a little bit more detail into that for me? What time frame would you be looking at? How would that work exactly?
Well, I think that it could be basically a form that a person brings to their doctor or to their health authority, and chooses a set number of years. I suppose you could put a cap on it if you wanted to, maybe 5 years or so, or up to a decade, depending on the needs of the individual and their level of comfort with MAID.
Thank you. I've only got a few seconds left, so I'm going to turn to Mr. LeBlanc. You said you had some ideas on safeguards. We don't have time for you to set them out tonight, but would you be good enough, sir, to send us some information in writing if that's possible?
Your microphone, Mr. LeBlanc.
Will be my pleasure, but that would be very short, because I do believe that you don't need extra safeguards for people who are physically disabled for MAID. To believe that those people need extra safeguards means that because they are physically disabled, they are always also, by definition and automatically, intellectually disabled as well. Otherwise, that means that you believe that they're not in a position, because they have a physical impairment of some kind, they are not able to make decisions by themselves, for themselves.
Merci, Monsieur Leblanc.
Thank you, Mr. Leblanc.
Monsieur Thériault.
Now we have Mr. Thériault for 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. If I understand correctly, in order to continue the conversation with Mr. Leblanc, if I understand you correctly, what you find discriminatory is if in the end we don't allow you to have access to MAID, as you said earlier, that you had worked hard so that in Quebec we'd be able to set up the law on end-of-life care, and I understand you think. Yes, quite well. It's that, as I said, it would be very discriminatory if a person meets all of the criteria that are set out by the Supreme Court in Carter. I don't see why, if you have a missing arm or some other disability, would have anything to do with the decision-making process. It would be altogether discriminatory. And why would we treat those people's applications? It would be discriminatory because you add yet another obstacle for those people to the use of their right to ask for medical assistance in dying. Why would these people who already have many problems in life would be limited to different, more severe requirements than someone who's asking for medical assistance in dying because they're dying of a cancer? It's totally discriminatory. These people don't need to be protected. They're able to defend themselves. And if we respect their rights as human beings, and if we respect their rights, they will be able to protect themselves. They don't need to have someone come and treat them like children or use them as game pieces in another agenda. If their rights are respected, people who have physical disabilities are able to take decisions themselves and for themselves. Given that if the disability is individual and is unique to that person, there's always a social aspect to it, and indeed we have to not create further handicaps for that person. You said that these people are able to think for themselves. There's an old philosopher who wrote a book in old age, Paul Ricard, his name was, and he said that autonomy isn't reduced to physical autonomy or social autonomy. The full sense of the word autonomy is a moral autonomy. That is to say, the ability to make a practical judgment for oneself and to make clear and enlightened decisions for oneself. And I imagine that you would agree with Ricard on that. Absolutely. That is the very essence of being a human being. It is the very essence of humanity, to be able to exercise that independence in the respective society. But there's no greater demonstration of what it is to be a human being than to fully assume your autonomy and independence. So in life and in terms of death as well. You said that you've been in a wheelchair for 20 years, and I imagine that you haven't reached the point that you wanted to exercise your right to have medical assistance in dying, but I imagine that it must have been some comfort to you that before you get to that level of intolerableness, that it is possible for you to do so. Yes, and that is why I worked so hard at the provincial level to this end. I think that no one wishes to have to turn to medical assistance in dying. And I think we are all afraid of dying. But what gives us the most fear is how we're going to die. Is it going to be some kind of agony that we'll have to face? And the fact of having a choice, it's not an obligation. It's one choice amongst others made. Each person makes their own decision in light of their own situation and convictions and beliefs. So for me, indeed, it is a great relief, and it is for my family as well. I've been in a wheelchair for 20 years. For 20 years, my family's been taking care of me as a person in a wheelchair, and the perspective, if I ever am to reach that point, thank you, Mr. Leblanc, to turn to MAID, it is a great comfort for me and for my loved ones. Thank you, Mr. Leblanc.
Mr. McGregor.
Madam Co-Chair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jama, I think I'll start with you. As you know, like, our committee was given a fairly broad mandate from the House to cover 5 areas. Only one of these is actually going to turn into law. We're kind of studying the issue, knowing that in March of next year, mental illness is an underlying condition will come into effect in 2023. But the others are fairly broad. And, you know, when this committee got underway in April, and we had our first couple of meetings, it felt right away that we were doing a fairly rushed job. You know, the House initially gave us a deadline of June the 23rd, and I think it very quickly dawned upon members of this committee that was just going to be an impossible task. And we've now extended it to October 17th, but you know, your testimony today and our earlier conversation, I remember that you were talking to me about the idea of pausing or slowing down. I guess what I'd like you to tell us as a committee is, you know, can you expand on that a little bit more, why we should pause or slow down this conversation? And could you suggest ways in which this committee could further engage with various members of the disability community over the remainder of the spring, the summer, and the fall, just so we have as broad a cross-section of voices as possible?
Yeah, a lot of us don't have the resources that the Dying with Dignity lobby, funded by Margaret Atwood and larger names, has. So by the time I learned, and many of us learned, about the expansion of Bill C-7, we didn't make it to the 3rd reading. It was an unprecedented 18 months. That's how long it took you all to make the decision to expand MAID. And I have named the names of people who died, not because they wanted to end their lives, but because they had no other options around food and shelter and housing. I understand that the previous speaker did say that none of us want to use MAID, and everybody's afraid to die. But there have already been lives lost, on top of the fact that we know it's been documented and talked about by the Ontario Human Rights Commission that MAID was being offered in jails in place of probation. We have an obligation, a moral obligation, to stop. Rather than reviewing the harms that have been caused, this committee has spent more time talking about potential expansions. You should have been using this time to look back and to look at the mistakes and to look at what the rush has caused, especially in light of COVID, especially in light of the despair that a lot of disabled people are feeling around what it means to live as a disabled person right now, where we know that doorknobs were being removed from long-term care homes, where many people couldn't afford to eat. I have met disabled people living in tents who were housed, who were talking about using MAID, in tents outside, in wheelchairs. Like, this isn't okay, and it's not enough for those of us who want to feel some semblance of comfort to be making decisions for the rest of the people who are not in the room. Because guess what? Nicole Gladue died naturally after setting the way for people to use MAID for no other option. This committee has an obligation to slow down and to talk to more people, to talk to houseless people, to talk to racialized people, to talk to young people and youth, and not succumb to the force that is the Dying with Dignity lobby, because it's not fair for the rest of us.
One thing I want to expand upon is just on, like, there in the minister's mandate letter, she's been tasked with a review of access to federal disability programs. In the previous parliament, the government introduced, I think it was Bill C-35, which was going to set up a federal disability benefit. It was introduced on June 21st. They knew an unnecessary election was coming, so I think that was introduced for show. We are well into the 44th parliament. We still have no sight of a federal disability benefit bill coming forward. In the 45 seconds I have, could you maybe just expand on like what the landscape is out there, and when we look at federal disability supports, what does the Parliament of Canada really have to tackle to address that issue? Because I think that's a big part of this conversation.
Disabled people should not be legislated into poverty in every single province, and that's what's happening. People can't afford to eat or pay rent. There's also our healthcare issues. Why does it take up to 2 years to access a pain clinic in Ontario? Why are there so many wait lists? You're making it impossible for us to choose to live. And especially those of us who are aging into our disability, it's getting harder and harder, not because we can't do it ourselves, but because there's no resources available and not enough funding in our healthcare systems. And we can't simply afford it. And so as much as we're talking about the federal disability benefit, we also need to be talking about our healthcare systems and the failures there too. And this committee has an obligation to look into that because it's all connected. If you're going to allow people to kill themselves, look into why they're doing that and look into our healthcare systems.
Thank you. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Garneau for questions from the senators.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and we'll start with the senators with 3-minute rounds, and nous allons commencer avec la...
We'll begin with the Senator Meji. You have 3 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Ms. Jama. I have the impression of having understood that when people are in a situation of poverty and they're poorly housed, that's the first thing that's going to be proposed to them is made. And in fact, there must be some care. It's the person who should decide. This should never be imposed on anyone. Have you heard stories that would say that some people had made imposed on them?
Been stories in the media. Like there were 2 cases, I talked about them in my testimony. One of them was a woman named Denise who she was looking for affordable housing. Her friends were fundraising for her and it still wasn't enough. Her only other option, because where she was living was causing her disability to flare up so badly and she also couldn't afford to eat food, her only other option was to use MAID. And when I talk about systemic coercion, I'm not saying somebody's holding a gun to your head. I'm saying that the systems are working together to provide no other options for people to choose life and that we're allowing that to happen as elected officials. And it is still coercion, whether or not someone explicitly told you to do it. If we are voting on situations that don't allow housing supports but allow death as an option first.
Because as you heard, other people with disabilities who found their pain intolerable, they're comfortable with the idea that when they need this, they will apply for it. So I don't have the sense that they're under pressure. I mean, they're saying if there's no more medicine that they can give me to alleviate that, I might ask for MAID. So I'm having a bit of trouble following it. But perhaps that if we're poorly housed, then that's not the same thing. What do you think?
When you have lived without, it's not hard to imagine that people wouldn't want to. It's getting harder and harder to live. Like these cases were all over the Toronto Star of people saying, I've tried really hard to survive, but MAID is my only way out, and I wish it wasn't. I wish I had housing because I would have stayed on this earth. And so that's a coerced choice. It's a choice made because there was no other option available, so it's not really a choice. And we've seen that in this country where, like, forced sterilization was a thing against disabled people, institutionalization, the idea that many of us don't want to send our family to long-term care homes, but it's our only option because we can't afford anything else. All these things are examples of coercion. And so while it may be hard for specific committee members to imagine why someone would make that choice, it's because maybe you've not been without food or shelter or housing or had to live in these situations. I have. So I've come all the way here to tell you that it's true.
Thank you. Senator Kutcher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Two questions. The first one to Ms. Jama. In MAID assessment, the assessors, as we heard already, pay very careful attention to treatments that people have had and treatments that are suggested as possible. Now, there have many providers have suggested that this kind of assessment should also include addressing structural inequalities. For example, the need for housing, income assistance, and that those should be integrated into every single MAID assessment so that they don't coerce people where they shouldn't be coerced. What would you think about, would you suggest or consider that that thing should be essentially a part of any MAID assessment to make sure that people aren't being coerced?
Absolutely. And at the same time, I think about the case in BC where a woman accessed MAID under the 90 days and it's being investigated by the RCMP, right? And she was given MAID and she didn't access treatment for her disability, her mental health disabilities. And that's being investigated. And so while we can keep saying we're going to add safeguards, if we lose one life, that's enough for us to pause and evaluate why that happened. And as somebody with mental health issues myself, I have been in treatments over and over again. It's difficult to sustain it when you're also trying to continue to live, right? And sometimes I get so overwhelmed and I'm like, I don't want to be here. But that changes maybe after the 90-day period. And it's hard, but I just mean that we need to have more options available because it took me a year to get into proper therapy. And even then, I could have decided to do something else. And so it's like, one, we're losing people because they're
for someone
okay.
else.
Okay.
So, I think you answered that question
Okay.
very well. Thank you so much. I have a question for our first witness, Mr. Adams. You talked about you've done a MAID assessment, but you have not yet chosen to move towards MAID. And you said something that I didn't quite catch, something about reduced stress and improved state of mind. Did you mean that you were getting actually relief from intolerable suffering by simply having gone through that process and having that option? I couldn't quite understand that.
Yes, I'm trying to explain that the knowledge that I am assessed and approved has changed the way that I experience my condition psychologically. Like I feel just intense relief, and as a result, it gives me more strength to endure my episodes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Delphond.
Senator Delphond.
List, I think this is very important, and their testimonies are very important. Ma question est pour Monsieur.
My question is for Mr. Leblanc. You heard the dilemma is just that some groups can be systemically disadvantaged, and it means that the options are less interesting than those that perhaps you had. You're an educated man, you were a deputy minister in Ottawa and in Quebec City. What do you say to people that all persons with disabilities should not have access to MAID in order to protect those who can't provide consent that seems as valid as yours?
Je vois pas le lien.
I understand the connection you can make between being disabled and having the physically disabled and versus being disabled intellectually. It's the same thing as saying when we were having the debates as to whether or not women were intelligent enough to vote because they were women. It's the same kind of argument here in 2022 on the fact that someone who has physical difficulties would not be able to make decisions for themselves. Clearly, we have enormous problems. There are socioeconomic problems, and also problems with the healthcare system. MAID cannot cover all of these difficulties. It's not a magic bullet. It's not a panacea. It's not a generic remedy. And I understand that people would have a great deal of difficulty. But it should not prevent those who meet the criteria as set out by the Supreme Court to be able to turn to that remedy. Thank you.
Merci, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I think many people seeking MAID are less able than they once were. Some may be disabled or have become disabled. Some may be contemplating suicide reluctantly because they don't have the option of MAID. But I think we have to be very careful in our discussions here that we do some fact-checking. I think it's risky that we accuse MAID providers, licensed medical professionals in this country, of coercing people into MAID, of imposing MAID on people, of making offers of MAID in exchange for freedom. These are matters of law. The courts have ruled on this, and the governments have responded by writing very, very carefully crafted legislation. So I want us to be very cautious in that. I want to go to Mr. Adams, if I could, because you have been through that process, both attempting to do so under C-14 and then again under C-7. You said that you thought it was an intense process. Give us a couple of examples. Do you think you could have walked in and said, I have nowhere to live, or I'm part of a minority group, please give me MAID, and they would have responded?
I certainly wouldn't think to say those words. I think that would be totally divorced from my reasoning for going forward with MAID, or going forward with the assessment for MAID. And I am an Indigenous person, and so some of the conversations tonight at this meeting, I feel were kind of talking about me without me, and I find that a little bit frustrating. So to get back to your question, no, I definitely not. It was I found it very personal, in a sense, in that I felt that was really sharing things with the assessor that perhaps I hadn't told anyone before. Things like indignities that had occurred as a result of my symptoms that I haven't even told my parents. These are very sensitive conversations that I had, and I felt heard for the first time, probably in my life. I felt that I was seen, and I can't really give you in proper words, the gravity of what I experienced in that assessment. What it meant for me was enormous, and I'm sorry to emote here, but it's hard not to. It's profound. That's all I could say.
But that experience was thorough. You couldn't have walked in and said, look, I'm having a bad day.
It was extremely thorough, yes.
Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Martin.
And thank you to all of the witnesses for your very compelling testimonies. I have two questions for Ms. Jama. The first one, Dr. Heidi Jantz has written about Canada's MAID regime, saying, when a government starts making laws based on the premise that some lives are not worth living, it is setting out an extremely dangerous path. Ms. Jama, do you believe that the current MAID framework communicates to people with disabilities that their lives are less valuable than able-bodied Canadians?
Yes, I have maintained, like many other disabled people throughout this entire conversation, that I am pro-choice in life and in death. But when you do have a situation where it's been documented that disabled people are choosing to use MAID because they have no other options available. And again, I talked about Chris Gladders, who was sitting in his feces and urine for days and then chose to use MAID because of an understaffed, undercared for long-term care situation. He didn't have another option. And so yes, this idea that we're going to allow only disabled people and not the rest of the population to use MAID as a way out because of other conditions that they can't control, I want everybody to have the comfort of using MAID when they want to. But I'm also thinking about all the people who have died, and it's been documented. It's in the news, so I think you all should look it up. It's like in the Toronto Star in the last couple of weeks. I want these people to have their choice, but I don't want more people to die if their needs could have been taken care of elsewhere. My comfort, in having MAID as an option, is not more important than someone else's life.
What can be done to improve the MAID regime to protect Canadians with disabilities from premature deaths? So what recommendations do you have?
Like I said earlier, I recommend that this committee moves slowly. We're moving really quickly to talk about further potential expansions versus looking back on all the missteps and all the potential cases that I'm talking about that you guys seem to not know about, where people have died when they shouldn't have. Where in our jail systems, there were situations where also MAID was being offered in place of parole, to the point where the Canadian Human Rights Commission last week put out a statement against this. So what I'm saying is we need to slow down, and my recommendation is that we take our time and take this seriously.
Thank you very much. And to all of the witnesses, a very big thank you for coming on this evening. First of all, putting up with a large delay, but secondly, for your powerful testimonies. I just want you to know also that this is the first session on the theme of disability, but we will be talking about this subject as we go forward. There are other sessions planned. Thank you very much again for your presence this evening. With that, we will suspend momentarily and to get ready for the second panel. Thank you.